We'll be starting in 2 minutes. All right, everyone. It's 11:30, so we'll start now. Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for joining PR Newswire's webinar today. My name is Christine from PR Newswire Malaysia, and I'll be hosting our event today. I hope that you'll find this webinar beneficial for your company and organization as we discuss some topics on developing crisis communication strategies amidst this COVID-19 pandemic. Today, we have two speakers with us who will be sharing insights on how companies should tweak their communication plans to correspond with the current situation, what kind of stories would pique the interest of the media during this time, and what differences they have observed in the past months in the ways brands have executed their communications plans. First up, we have Nicholas Sagau. Nicholas is the Group General Manager for Media Prima Digital, the digital arm of Malaysia's largest media conglomerates, Media Prima Berhad. With a total of 15 years' experience in the media and digital space, Nicholas champions Media Prima Group's eSports content while heading Media Prima Labs. He is also a council member of the Malaysia Digital Association. Nicholas is a frequent speaker and moderator at a variety of digital industry conferences and seminars, such as the recent Connect Tech Asia in Singapore, TV Digital Connect Asia in Bangkok, Exabytes Internet Marketing Summit in KL, Level Up KLC Game Developers Conference in KL, and Uyala Digital Video Conference in Sydney, among others. His areas of focus include digital innovation, games and apps development, eSports, corporate in innovation and startups, corporate incubator, OTT, and digital video content distribution. So let us welcome Nicholas today.
Hi everyone.
Nicholas. Hi.
Hi.
So our second speaker is Justin Ten. Justin has more than 2 decades of experience in the communications industry and has provided senior counsel to C-level executives from diverse sectors. He was formerly the founder and owner of boutique agency Lumos PR, where he provided strategic communication services and senior counsel on crisis and issues management to a multitude of clients, including McDonald's, Heineken, CCC ECRL, and CPP Petroleum Engineering. Justin is no stranger to WPP and Hill+Knowlton Strategies, having previously held the role of Associate Director for Technology Practice since 2005 to 2008, and later returning as the Managing Director from 2013 to 2017. In between his first 2 tours of duty at Hill+Knowlton Strategies, Justin spent 5 years with a leading local boutique agency where he led a team servicing clients such as Dell, Intel, Microsoft, Hitachi Data Systems, and Alcatel-Lucent. Justin's core skills are in the areas of crisis and issues management, training, corporate communications, and technology. So welcome, Justin, to our webinar today. Thank you both for taking your time to do this with us this morning. Before we start, I would like to introduce our program flow to everyone. So this webinar will be broken down to two sections. The first is a Q&A panel session, followed by the audience Q&A session. We highly encourage our audience to type your questions for the panelists in the Q&A chat box throughout the event, and I'll deliver your questions for you during the Q&A session. Without further ado, we shall now begin our online webinar session. So I would like to direct the first question to Nicholas. Hi, Nicholas, how are you today?
I am fine. Apart from the hay issue, I think we're okay on the lockdown.
Great, great. So the first question for you today would be, overseeing the digital operations of Media Prima Digital, how has this pandemic impacted your publications?
Yeah, thanks, Christine. I think we've seen extraordinary. I mean, we're living in an extraordinary time, and especially operating in extraordinary time. We've seen a couple of things as really change over the course of 4 or 5 weeks. Let's start with the usage of media, right? And in the perspective of watching video, reading content. At our end, we've really seen growth between 20 to 30% of volume of more people doing that on a platform, rather ranging from watching news content, entertainment content, and even playing games during this time. In terms of how we operate, in general, we really try to make sure that our reporters, that whoever are going out into the market and collecting stories has minimal exposure to the virus. Obviously, in the past, we used to be sending like 5 to 6 different crew covering a large event over the entire MCO or even the COVID time. One of our priorities is to make sure our reporters, the teams are going in the field are minimize their exposure, right? So one of the things that we started to do as we kick into the operating under the MCO is to really try to make sure that we share content across our platform. As you know, we have a few different segments of business in Media Prima. We have our news portal, which is the NST digital side. We have the TV business. We run like TV3 and all the other TV channels within the network. We also have Facebook and YouTube running concurrently, and also we have the lifestyle side, which is a Rev Asia, the Says and Obulan. What we tried is basically when we collect stories, we make sure that we are able to share this content across our network, and they will be able to, each newsroom will be able to repackage according to the tone of story or direction that they want to write into on the site. So we really make sure that everyone is sort of sharing the content rather than sending everyone to collect content and it comes out and then we expose a lot more people at risk in the outside. And the other one, probably the last thing that we really drive is basically encourage across the board the use of digital in managing our operation during this time. Yes, we implemented a lot of digital strategy and digital innovation transformation over the last years, but really this MCO time has really pushed everyone to make sure that we really use certain tools that we have actually brought on board. Very very big good example. We do a lot of remote editing. The guys are working from home. When the content are ingest into the platform, they basically can edit from their house. And to be honest with you, I'm very very happy to say that it's actually a bit more effective. We're seeing a lot of content coming out during this time. Even we were a bit worried that the amount of content being churned out will be less, but we've seen the number that content that we churn out every other day during this MCO time is still within the way that we used to operate in the office.
So technology has really played an important part for your team in the way they source for content and also execute their messages on your various platforms, like leverage on all your different platforms to reach different audiences at this time, right?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Great. So the next question is for Justin. Justin, what are the noticeable changes in companies' way of communicating messages since the COVID-19 pandemic started?
I think if you're referring to how companies communicate during a crisis, then there is not much of a difference because the principles of crisis communications remain the same. The lack or absence of a physical centralized crisis center does present challenges, though. But if you're saying like in general how they are communicating, I guess given the restriction in movement with the MCO, companies that are agile have done very well in managing their communications to reach out to their customers. I want to cite an example, and it's one that Nicholas is probably aware of. In early April this year, Huawei collaborated with Media Prima Group to run a technology special report to introduce its latest line of phones and ecosystem products. That 30-minute segment was broadcasted on TV3, NTV7, and 8TV in 3 different languages. On top of that, the 30-minute broadcast was also streamed live across Media Prima social platforms, as well as some other media partners. So in normal circumstances, Huawei would have just hosted an on-ground event and invited hundreds of media personnel and business partners to that event itself. But because of the MCO, a company like Huawei leveraged the power of social media and also Media Prima's wide range of media platforms and assets to reach the mass audience. I guess, indeed, necessity is the mother of all invention. When something presents a challenge, companies need to be able to be agile enough to change.
Right. Nicholas, do you have any take on the Huawei and Media Prima collaboration?
Yeah, that was quite interesting. I suppose, I think it was pre-planned. The team pre-planned this before doing the usual way of launching a product or introducing a new product. But the MCO really constrained those activations. So I think they work really hard to put this together with Huawei and the agency team. And really putting a show for the product itself. And even I think it was quite funny because we were all into this MCO news. Everyone I think got a bit of like too much of the story, and then suddenly in the middle of that, Huawei launched a phone, which is it's a nice change. Everyone, and we've seen a lot of interaction because everyone is at home, right? They're sitting and watching it. They probably had a lot of share of voice during those time on the brands itself. Yeah.
Great. It's nice to see companies innovate during this time as well. Nicholas, in addition to that, what differences have you seen in the way companies have communicated their crisis comms during this COVID-19 pandemic versus other crisis situations?
Yeah, I think we'll talk a bit about this later on, right? But one of the things that we've seen is that a lot of companies who are not ready to operate from home are really affected by this. And those who are really active in the market are really the companies that they have this work from home in their DNA, right? They can work remotely, especially like startup. You've seen the delivery boys, the Grab, Food Panda. They're really going out there communicating about their services, promoting services, and I think one of the really good thing that we've seen a lot of these companies doing when they communicate is they really help our community. The CSR angle of it is really important, and I'm really, I think if you look at it from that angle, it was they were set to be able to operate in this kind of condition. I think companies should always be able to communicate to the customer throughout the entire time. But we've seen some example where companies they couldn't do it because they probably don't have access to the materials that they have. Right? It's in the office or any other production that they have. And I've seen some stories recently, the last few days. Grab actually, I think it was Grab, to actually shot a commercial using Zoom, right? I think these companies are they really innovative in really operating during this work from home or even their MCO time. But if they do, they also help with the community. There's a lot of CSR. There's a lot of communication to help the government in communicating what is needed during this time.
Right. This pandemic has definitely is definitely pressure testing brands' purposes. Like when you mentioned CSR, I've actually came across many studies that showed that a brand's sincerity in carrying out civic duties to address like public concerns really does affect customer loyalty. In fact, there's also an article published by Hill+Knowlton Strategies on their global website about corporate citizenship. Now is the time for corporate citizenship amidst COVID-19. That was a really good write-up. Yeah. So, Justin, for industries directly affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, such as F&B, travel, and hospitality, as well as the events industry, is keeping quiet a right move for them now? If not, what sort of communication approaches should these companies be taking during this time?
I believe that any company whose business is impacted by COVID-19 should continue to communicate. In fact, they should be even more forthcoming in their communications on impact and action plans. At the end of the day, being proactive, transparent, honest, and upfront will only help companies enhance their credibility amongst their own stakeholders. This also provides an assurance to customers that the company is prepared and able to respond appropriately. At the end of the day, no one expects a perfect answer, but I believe everyone expects a credible and honest response. So if you keep quiet, there'll be more questions. At least when you speak up and are honest about the current situation, you build that trust and people will want to listen to you.
Thanks, Justin. So we just touched on like industries that is directly affected by the COVID-19. On the contrary, there are industries on the rise, such as gaming and e-commerce. How should these brands be communicating to the media during this time while being mindful of the current situation?
Is that to me or to Nicholas?
To you as well, yeah.
Right, okay. Well, those industry that are currently benefiting from the current situation must definitely strike a balance between profit and conscience. It's fantastic to see many of them contributing to initiatives that help the affected communities. Such outreach is important because it underlines that they are giving back to the communities in which they live and operate in. I think what's very important to note is that this is not the time to thump your chest. Rather, it's about getting into the trenches, doing what you can to help those in need. There are many examples out there. Companies like Tencent, Alibaba, Lazada, they're all doing their part to help, from distributing medical supplies around the world to helping local SMEs stay in business by providing a stimulus package. So at the end of the day, while you're benefiting from the current situation, you should also be very mindful in how you communicate. Do what you can to help, because at the end of the day, when you do that, people remember you for the good that you've done.
Thanks, Justin. And Nicholas, as we know, you're currently championing Media Prima Group's eSports content and heading Media Prima Labs. How are brands currently engaging with you on their content? Is it business as usual for them, or have they tweaked their communications in any way?
It's definitely not business as usual. Like I said just now, a lot of the campaign that the cloud are being prepared, especially going into the Ramadan and Raya period, have been really affected. A lot of these clients are, they try very, very hard, to really pivot quickly into creating campaigns that are more COVID friendly. We've seen, we recently, as well as for esports for us, we have a really large esports tournament where we do the tournament on ground, in a big arena. We were supposed to launch it in April. That's been really affected that we can't operate anymore, right? But quickly, the team that really created a newer campaign to bring this esports tournament going into online, where we launch a lunchtime cup. You can play games. So you've seen trends of people playing games, at home. So we actually launched a lunchtime cup, what we call 3 weeks ago, where we get people to play during lunchtime. The more people watching it, the sort of the prize money goes up. And we've seen the number like double up when we launched it back in 3 weeks ago. We had about 500 to 600 concurrent viewer, but on last Thursday we were almost double that number, and we're actually going live shortly at about 12 lunchtime cup. You can check it out on our Facebook. But this is a certain things that the clients are looking out for, activation that are more virtual friendly. It's interacting with people directly in their homes. Yeah.
Right. So in case we have any PUBG players online with us today, please check out Media Prima's Lunchtime Cup. This is an initiative by your gaming platform called My Game On, right?
Yeah, it's an initiative by My Game On, one of our gaming platform. We run IGN Southeast Asia as well. So a little plug in there. And today it's quite interesting because one of the sponsors for that tournament is Subway. It's like we've been talking to them for a couple of weeks, and they came on board. And they knew how how effective we will be. Basically interacting with audience at home. They're sitting and playing games. Why not be partnering with a game platform like us? Yeah.
Great. That's a great, interesting initiative. Nicholas, one more thing is, do you think non-COVID-19 stories will still be well received by the media during this period of time, especially for Media Prima's mainstream outlets like NST, Berita Harian?
Yeah, interestingly, over the the last, this is the third round of I wouldn't say it's the last, or this is the third round of MCO. We've seen trend of people moving away from the MCO and COVID story, because I think we were all reading this story for a couple of weeks now. We've seen those story trend going down, except for the time when there's a press conference, a big announcement, you'll see numbers going up. But we've seen people going back, watching a reality show, watching drama, binging on some of our content over our site like Tonton, or even on YouTube as well. So yeah, we've seen in general people are going away from the stories, and we are actually building a couple of strategy to sort of how to make sure that we transition some of these stories, and making sure that we can track them properly, and building topic that will be more of interest moving forward. It's potentially related to the MCO or even COVID as well.
Thanks, Nicholas. Justin, based on what Nicholas just mentioned about brands moving away from COVID-19 stories, what other story opportunities are there with clients with non-COVID-19 related stories?
Well, I think generally it's and I speak from the standpoint of my own list of clients. Generally, it's business as usual for most of our clients. But if there are any non-COVID-19 related content, we are more mindful of things like promotional news, and we would usually want to temper the enthusiasm, so to speak. After all, it's a difficult period for many people, so we need to be empathetic in how we communicate. It's very interesting for you to ask that question about, how are there any other non-COVID-19 related content that can be pushed? I believe that whether it's COVID-19 or something else, we eventually have to operate in that sense of normalcy. We shouldn't let something like that just take over how we operate, how we think, how we communicate. Right? There will be news that's important, but there are other things that we still need to get on with our lives. So that's the way I see it. Any stories are useful, are relevant, but always put that in the right context of the current situation. Be empathetic wherever you can.
Thanks, Justin. Nicholas, what are some COVID-19 topics and stories that you will be specifically looking out to report during this time? And what newsmakers or experts would you be keen to feature in these stories?
I think Nicholas's line probably dropped.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. He's back.
Sorry, back. It's just drop out a bit. Sorry.
Would you like me
So
to
you're,
repeat the question?
yeah. Sorry, I think you repeated the question. Drop out a little bit.
Okay,
Sorry
no
about that.
problem. The question was, what are some COVID-19 topics and stories that you will be specifically looking out to report during this time? Or what newsmakers or experts would you be keen to feature in these stories?
Yeah, I think it's more. I think post. I think a lot of interest will be on post MCO kind of story. We've seen people going and looking for stories that especially around like what will happen after that, right? I think public in large, everyone is trying to figure out like how we're going to operate in this new norm, right? For companies, they will want to listen to how are you going to operate. For example, if you have a restaurant that you're operating, a chain of restaurant you're operating, and you need to be able to tell them how we're going to operate from now moving forward. Or even especially services, right? Expectation would be like everything is back to normal, right? But obviously in this new norm, I think a lot of operation will be a bit different. I think a lot of people are moving into digital, but I think companies should be able to continue to communicate, when, the MCO is lifted out, what should we expect from our current service. So I think public will be very interested in this kind of topic moving forward, and really keeping that communication continuously open on how what's the situation going to be after that.
On mainly on post-crisis initiatives.
Yep.
All right. Justin,
Yeah.
without naming your clients, do you have any shareable examples of how you have helped clients who have been affected by the COVID-19 crisis in executing their crisis comms?
Well, so far we haven't really had any clients that has gone into a crisis mode because of what's happening. So there's really not much to share there. But in general, we have been proactively helping clients move forward despite the movement restriction and other challenges that comes with it. I mean, Huawei was one example of how they kind of like pivot and then decide that let's use these current platforms that are available, and they went to Media Prima. In nearly all cases, even if your company goes into a crisis, your comm strategies don't change much. But the way you reach out to your customers, to your stakeholders, yeah, that definitely will change. So it's really about rethinking the way you engage with your customers, the media, tapping into more online tools, online platforms. Some of our clients are even looking into creating their own news channel because they feel that that's the best way to get their news out. Not challenging Media Prima. I mean, Media Prima is going to be a giant there, but their own news channel so that they can get their side of the story out. And I believe a lot of agencies are helping their clients do that. So crisis, how they are reacting, we don't really have one. And even if I have one, I can't really talk about it because, I have a non-disclosure agreement. I can't really talk about those crises unless they sign off.
Yes. So it's interesting to know that companies are actually coming up with their own news channels. That's a very interesting initiative.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you look at how the media landscape has changed and how companies have embraced things like social media to communicate, they realize that they're essentially what I would call 4 quadrants when it comes to pushing your content out. There's the earned media, which all of us are very familiar with, but I think increasingly that opportunity is shrinking. There's paid media, which today is growing, whether it's paid content or whether it's through influencers, it's paid media. Then there's shared media, right? where you work with your partner and you use a partner networks. And of course, the last one is owned media. You own your own platforms. Obviously, you've got your websites, you've got your social media platforms, but some companies have gone further ahead to create their own microsite, and it's purely on news. And those kind of news is not so much focusing 100% on them. I mean, a good example that I always like to share with my clients is ANA, that Japanese airline. Several years ago, they realized that for them to promote themselves, they can either go head on, right, with other airlines, or they could be a bit innovative, a bit smarter. Instead of promoting their airlines, they promoted tourist attractions in Japan. They promoted lifestyle and culture in Japan, and that microsite basically just provided all those content. It was independent in that sense. People loved it. People would go there. It became the go-to site for people to go and find out more about Japan, how to travel around Japan, best places to stay, stuff like that. But at the end of every article, there's always a call to action. You know, interested in going to Japan? Click here. And if you click, they send you to ANA's booking website. So, you know, that's a good example of what I mean when I say creating your own news channel, right? It doesn't have to be just all about you. It's about the industry that you're in. And a lot of companies are looking into that.
Thanks, Justin. That was very insightful. One more question for you, Justin, is if COVID-19 ends today, what strategy should an organization undertake in executing their post-crisis communications?
I think, you know, the first thing that they should do is go celebrate. But on a more serious note, I think while the strategy remains largely the same, all of us really need to adapt to the new normal. And that means changing the way we think and operate, communicate and engage, because social distancing practices will still be in place for a while longer post-MCO. So strategy won't change much. It's really about the execution side. I also want to say that, you know, my take is that COVID-19 will never go away. I know it sounds scary, but if you think about it, it will probably be something that we have to live with from now on, just like the common flu and dengue or malaria. And we will eventually have a vaccine for it. So if anything, a company's communication tactics will change, but the overall comm strategy remains.
Thanks, Justin. Nicholas, I have the similar question for you. If COVID-19 ends today, what are you expecting or anticipating to hear from companies post-crisis?
I think it's really like what Justin was saying, just echoing that. I think everyone needs to be ready to operate in the new norm. You know, moving digital is one thing that, you know, everyone needs to really do, going out and really communicating, using it to communicate. And I think the second one is really helping a larger communication in relating to, you know, social distancing, right? To make sure that do we help the government or do we help the authorities to basically continue to control this pandemic that's going around? So anything around that, I think companies should be able to, you know, putting things together in the same way of communicating. So once this is all over, I suppose everyone going back to the operation. So people would expect this kind of communication from companies. Yeah.
Thank you, Nicholas. And one last question for the both of you. Maybe Justin can take this one first.
Sure.
This is actually to conclude our session. Do you have any final tips that you would like to share with our audience here today on how they should execute their communications?
Not so much tips, because I'm sure my peers have their own unique and innovative ways to communicate with their own audience. I think what I'd like to share though is this. As communications consultants, having a seat in the boardroom, or what I call the fifth seat, is important. And if we get that seat in the boardroom, we must remain as a voice of reason amidst this whole chaos and frenzy. We should continue to be the trusted advisor, especially in the areas of strategy, media relations, content creation, and creativity.
Thank you. Nicholas, do you have any final words for our audience today?
I think for companies, really is to continue to have an open channel with the customer, with the public about the business, about what you're doing, what are you going through. I've seen companies doing this very, very well. Those are continuously saying, they're being very honest about certain things that they're going through, which is I think brings life to the companies, and it's up to the companies themselves creativity to basically bring that out into the open in communicating an open channel. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nicholas and Justin, for sharing your insights. It was really, truly insightful. And with that, we now wrap up the first session of the event.
I see that there are a lot of questions coming in. There's like, 15 questions already?
Yeah, we will move to that once I've presented about some information about our resources here.
Sure.
Yeah, so now while we take some time to consolidate the questions from our audience, I would like to share that in the past months, PR Newswire has published a number of corporate announcements on behalf of brands who are providing relief efforts on the COVID-19 pandemic. Apart from that, we have churned out our own content pieces on best practices during this period with insights from investor relation professionals as well as media professionals across our APAC markets. You may scan the QR code and it will direct you to our webpage where you can find more of our COVID-19 related resources. Apart from that, PR Newswire has also put together a specially discounted 3-month crisis comms package that is valid for the month of April. This promotion consists of weekly monitoring reports and regional and domestic news distribution. There are add-on services such as template and customized writing, as well as multimedia news releases. So if you'd like to know more, please contact our marketing team at asia.marketing@prnasia.com. So now we will move to the audience question. Hold on, I think we have our lineup ready here.
Mm-hmm.
So question number 1 is a question for Justin. It says, you mentioned that companies should be communicating honestly about their situation, but should companies be actively promoting their services? You mentioned that companies should be communicating honestly. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the.
So yeah, I saw that question coming in. Yes, we need to be honest in how we communicate. Should you be communicating about your services? Like I said, it's the new normal. We have to accept the fact that life goes on. We can't stop doing what we do, but when we have to communicate on promoting your services, promoting your products, talking about other things outside of what's happening with COVID-19 and how it's impacting your company, it's really about communicating it in the right context. And when I say the right context, it's, don't be too, well, boastful isn't the right word, but, temper your enthusiasm. Bear in mind that there are people out there that's finding it very difficult during this period in time. So it's really striking that balance, knowing when to shout and when to push your services, but also be mindful of how it may be received by your audience. I don't know whether that helps in trying to answer your question, but it's really about striking that balance.
Thank you, Justin. And the second question is to Nicholas. Is it okay for companies not to comment about their BCP during COVID period, even when asked by journalists? By not commenting about your BCP, does this give a negative view to journalists?
I think this one is more of a company policy thing. Some companies would be willing to share the BCP, and some company wouldn't, right? I think the more important part of this answer to this is to build a confident level to your customer, rather than explaining the whole entire BCP. For us, it's mainly to tell them, hey, we're going MCO, we're going this COVID. We will still be operating. You'll still be watching our content. You still be reading our content tomorrow. So that's reassurance to ensure that our customers or viewers are that we will be around. Yeah, I think it's more of that.
Thank you, Nicholas. And the next one is for Justin. Justin mentioned that our communication strategies shouldn't change much, but it's how we communicate to the public. how do you balance COVID stories and non-COVID stories?
Okay, I'm trying to find an example that can illustrate how some companies have been doing it. So I won't name the companies specifically. So, for instance, a company that's involved in gaming, obviously they're doing quite well during this period. But do they then go out there and continue to promote the fact that you should spend more, since you're sitting at home, you should spend more time coming onto our gaming platform, enjoying yourselves? That's when you really need to take a step back. The comms consultant there probably needs to ask the team to take a step back and think about this. If you start encouraging too many people to jump onto your platform, there is a side effect, and that is hogging the bandwidth. And if you hog the bandwidth, and if it really does impact the way other people want to communicate, then that's not going to be good news, right? Somehow or rather, the finger might be pointing back at you. So, companies like Netflix, for instance, smart company, they know that people will be staying at home, watching a lot of content, right? Because there's nothing else to do. But what did they do? They decided to bring down the quality of their content so that it doesn't hog the bandwidth. So you still get to do what you want to do, which is to promote your services, but you're being smart about it by saying, I'm not going to give you full HD, for instance, right? It'll be standard quality content. You still get it. So it's the best of both worlds. So that's an example of how you strike that balance between doing something that you need to for your business and also being mindful.
Thanks, Justin. I have another question for the both of you. Maybe Nicholas can take this first. It's great to see corporations showing what they are doing, like how they are contributing to the community. But do you have any tips in formulating communication strategies to ensure companies are not perceived as performing publicity stunts?
Yeah, maybe Justin will be like more expert on this, but I think it's more of a striking a balance. For me, I've seen companies doing it in over the last 4 weeks. I think it's really striking the balance, not to be too much out there. Showing off, this is what I'm doing, right? To really really showing that honestly you are helping the community. Public. These days publics are very smart. We've seen it on our media platform. A slide, pura-pura, you will get a lot of bashing from social media, because at the end of the day, it's an open world now with social media. They can just, one line of negative would, impact the entire campaign that we do. So it's more of a striking a balance. I mean, your product and services more, and potentially that topic better. Just really strike a balance, not really showing off. Yeah.
I think if I can add, that's a very good question about, how do you ensure that you don't end up being perceived as making this into a publicity? I think first rule of thumb is whatever you're going to do during this period is not about you. It's about the people, the communities that you want to help, right? Focus on that, and your communications will then flow through along that line. We've seen it happen, even during political campaigns. You see it happen, right? They give away goodies, they give away rice, they give away all kinds of stuff. And then what do you see? You see someone putting their face on those packages. Now, that's classic publicity stunt that I am very against, and I hope that companies don't do that. You send out a package to the community, and then you have there brought to you by company X. That's fine, but please don't plaster it all over, because then it becomes a publicity stunt, right? So just tone it down. That's all. That's all we're saying.
Right. Don't be too flashy.
Yeah.
All right. So speaking on crisis communication, right, Justin, how should we deal with matters concerning sensitive matters like headcount reduction, closure or salary reduction, especially because, like you mentioned just now, we can't predict how long this situation will persist.
Right. Well, I think that question was partly addressed by Nicholas earlier. In times like this, you need to be open and truthful in how you communicate. So cutting down on workforce. If you don't say it, those affected will start talking about it. So it's going to come out anyway. So you might as well be upfront about it and say that yes, we are cutting down on workforce. And if you have a good reason to do so, share it. I mean, it's come to a stage whereby it's not a situation of it being a stigma that you have to cut workforce. I think we realize that there are companies that are struggling, and if they can't and they do it the right way, share that news. There was another question that I saw asking about whether you should disclose the fact that your staff has been tested positive, things like that. Those are very sensitive information, and I think that's where companies need to be careful. You can and you should let the public know or let the authorities know that there are individuals within the organization that has been tested positive, but there is no need for you to actually mention names because the privacy of that individual needs to be protected, right? The public doesn't need to know exactly who that person is. I think, at the height of this COVID-19 outbreak, there was a particular case, if you all have been following the news, that person should not have been highlighted. I personally felt it was unfair, right? To say that so-and-so, this particular individual was impacted, but no names is fine. But once you start drilling in, finding out who he is and where he was working and stuff like that, I think that's really breaching the privacy of that individual. So that's sensitive information, right? Don't go there, but be open enough. A good example is in Singapore when McDonald's had to announce to the authorities that there were certain individuals within the restaurants that were impacted. So they highlighted how many, where they were working, and then action plan. So the action plan is that those particular restaurants will be shut down to be cleaned, and then they will wait for the authorities to give them the green light to reopen. So that's fair enough.
Thanks, Justin. And in delivering crisis communication, right, when a company is in crisis mode, is speed the most essential element when delivering the communications?
In crisis, speed is the one and only thing that you should be focusing on first. The rule of thumb is that typically you have to respond within the first 60 minutes, right? And that will determine the difference between success and failure in handling a crisis. So that's what's known as the golden hour. But as we are all aware today, social media and citizen journalism has practically rendered the golden hour moot. Today, the golden hour is more like the golden minutes or even the golden seconds. So speed is important. How then do we handle it? Because things are moving so quickly. I suppose companies need to be even more prepared than ever. They need to be as engaged as ever with their community so that you can respond in appropriately and at speed. And responding in a timely fashion is very important because you need to really communicate what you know about the situation and what you can share, all right? Never speculate, never promise what you cannot deliver, right? Focus on the facts. That's very important. And what you can and will do at that given moment in time. If you have the right plans in place, you can definitely ensure that your company will emerge stronger from any crisis.
Thanks, Justin. I think I've already addressed this question earlier, but there's, I think this person wants you to go more in depth. It's about companies, yeah, it's about companies that are affected by this pandemic, like airlines, hotels, events. how should they tackle with the situation with respect to retaining their customers? Should they, because you mentioned that they shouldn't be keeping quiet at this time. So should they be running promotions? Should they be pleading for customers to stay?
Should they be running promotions? I guess you have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. I mean, a ridiculous example would be that a restaurant is shut down and then you obviously can't run promotions to ask people to come back because they can't, right? But you might want to consider highlighting the fact that you can still deliver the food, right? And it's delivery only. So you can still run your promotions that way. Pleading for your customers to come back. I mean, if your business is established enough, your customers aren't going to run away because of what's happening now, right? Your customers can come to you. And the reason why they can't come to you is because of the MCO. It's not because they don't want to come to you. If they don't want to come to you for reasons apart from the MCO, then that means there's something wrong with the business altogether.
Okay. And this one is for Nicholas. Okay. Should industry-leading companies in heavily impacted sectors such as travel look to collaborate with the media when COVID ends?
Yeah, we definitely should be, be more and more than happy to look at it. And I think as media company, we have especially as a local media company, we have our responsibility to help the ecosystem moving forward, right? Because I think a lot of SME especially, or even GLC big companies, people will want to be able to engage with their customer once this all thing being ending. So we have that, and we know that customers are coming back to us and saying that what can we do together once this thing is MCO is lifted up. And so we actually have a couple of strategies or a couple of offering that we've actually given to some of the customers asking about this. So we're definitely open for to help out. Yeah.
Great. And Justin, just now you mentioned about speed is one of the crucial elements when delivering your communications during a crisis mode. How about being overly transparent in your messaging? Can it create more alarm rather than calm? And when and how do you strike a balance?
Well, I think it's very important to note this fact, overly transparent. I don't think you should be overly transparent. Like I mentioned earlier, right? Communicate what you can communicate what you know at that point in time, right? Transparency doesn't mean that you tell the media or anyone everything that's happening within the organization. There are boundaries, there are limits to what you can talk about and what you cannot talk about, right? So your PR person, your communications consultant should be able to advise based on that current situation. For instance, say for instance, your company is impacted, like I mentioned earlier, some of your staff have been tested positive, right? I think it's only the right thing to do for you to communicate that, yes, there are individuals that have been impacted. They are currently in quarantine, and this is our action plan. So you are transparent enough to acknowledge that, but you're not going to be overly transparent to say, so-and-so's name is this is where he or she lives and stuff like that, because then you're going to create more panic, right? Because Malaysians being Malaysians, once they hear that, it's that person lives in I don't know, Sri Petaling, for instance, so everybody should avoid Sri Petaling, and that's bad for everyone. So there's really no point to be that overly transparent, if you know what I mean.
Yes, thank you, Justin. Okay, so I think we'll go with a final question for today, and this one is for Nicholas. Nicholas, what do you think of companies that are taking the lighter humor tone and approach in their content messaging during this time? For example, Tesco coming up with a husband guide.
I think I personally think we were in a media company. We were always like we like things to be balanced. Not too serious. Not too funny either. We've seen some of this, like I said, when they started up, right? We've seen some of these very agile companies able to create this kind of communication even during this time. It's I think it's credit to how they used to operate and the taking process of really going into digital and working from home, working remotely. I think this is the new norm. I think companies should continue to look at this and be able to come out with this kind of campaign. And I think it got everyone's attention, right, in the middle of everything else, and this campaign comes along. And in any campaign plan or media plan that we do, this is kind of things that that we want. If people talked about it, that's pretty much it's so much a win for you there. Yeah.
All right. Thank you both. I think our time is up here, so I would like to thank our speakers, Nicholas and Justin, once again for sharing your insights with our audience today. We truly appreciate it. Thank you both. I would also like to thank each and every one of you for participating in our webinar. I hope that all the webinars that we have put together thus far has helped you in one way or another. Thank you again, Nicholas and Justin.
Right. You're welcome. I know that there are a lot of other questions that were not addressed, but we do try our best. Maybe those questions can be forwarded to PR Newswire, and you can share that, and we'll try our best to respond.
Yes, we will help deliver the questions to you.
All right.
All right. Thank you again, everyone, and stay safe during this time.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.